Hi, Dr. Regan Robertson, CCO of Productive Dentist Academy here, and I have a question for you. Are you finding it hard to get your team aligned to your vision, but you know you deserve growth just like everybody else? That's why we've created the PDA Productivity Workshop. For nearly 20 years, PDA workshops have helped dentists just like you align their teams, get control of scheduling, and create productive practices that they love walking into every day. Just imagine how you will feel when you know your schedule is productive, your systems are humming, and your team is aligned to your vision. It's simple, but it's not necessarily easy. We can help. Visit productivedentist.com/workshop. That's productivedentist.com/workshop to secure your seats now.
And I remember I had a number of clients. There was a gal in San Francisco specifically who stopped me during one of our shoots. She said, I just have to tell you, when I saw your ad on Facebook, I knew it was like you were talking directly to me.
Welcome to the Everyday Practices Podcast. I'm Regan Robertson, and my co-host, Dr. Chad Johnson, and I are on a mission to share the stories of everyday dentists who generate extraordinary results using practical, proven methods you can take right into your own dental practice. If you're ready to elevate patient care and produce results that are anything but ordinary, buckle up and listen in. Welcome to Everyday Practices Podcast. I am your host, Regan Robertson, and my dutiful, lovely co-host, Dr. Chad Johnson, is MIA today because he is currently, as we speak, pulling a tooth. So what can you say about that other than duty calls? I am here today with a very special guest. I was in an interview on his podcast, Dental Marketing Secrets, just a few weeks ago, and I had the pleasure and joy of meeting Mark Thackeray. He is the owner of Practice Rocket. His specialty is high converting social media campaigns, and that is a hot topic. I was blown away on the interview that I had with you and your breadth of knowledge and your accomplishments, Mark. So welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Regan. It's so fun to be here. And I think Chad he probably jumped on and then took one look at his guest and was like, I'm out of here. Because I actually had him on the show too. And he's great, but he's like, oh, not that guy again.
I doubt that strongly. So just to give a little bit of authority to some of the accomplishments, I know we don't like to brag on ourselves, but Mark, you have been known to increase the amount of new patients to dental practices by almost 30% year over year. And what was interesting to me about that, flat number statistics that's impressive in and of itself, is that you were able to do that with a budget reduction in marketing by 15%. That's a big deal. And I know every business owner wants to know how to do more with less. And I know that social media overall can be extremely daunting. And I think it would be a great conversation to have today, Mark, to know how you're able to do this for practices across the nation. So how did you get your start in marketing? What fuels you and drives you to help doctors like this?
Oh, well, yeah, I've got kind of an interesting story. I actually went to school for marketing and advertising. It was a PR and advertising degree. Well, I did 2 degrees, that and international studies, but I was leaning towards the business side and ended up just jumping out of college. I graduated from college and then started a photography business, lo and behold. And I'd always grown up taking pictures, and I thought, oh, that'd be fun to do. My friend said, hey, let's do this. And we looked at the competition and said, like most people, yeah, we could do better than this, And so we kind of picked up the camera and ran with it. And, eventually it got to that point where I needed to figure this out. I had a wife at the time. We just had our first child. I'd been doing this for a couple of years, and we were doing all the right things. We were hustling, we were networking, we were posting on blogs, posting on social, doing all these things, right, that everyone tells you to do. And I went to college for this, for crying out loud, but I still was at this level, I couldn't break through that plateau. But eventually I got, oh, sorry, there's a noise in the background, which is usual for our house.
It's real life.
It is, totally. No, exactly. But I got introduced to these guys that talked about marketing in a different way. It was all about more direct response marketing and holding your marketing accountable for it. So every dollar you put in, you should be getting something back. And that really resonated with me, because I was hearing an awful lot about branding and things like that. And one of the guys said, hey, branding's great, but you can't take that to the bank, and I was like, oh yeah, no kidding. I've tried, and they don't do much for that. But eventually started employing or applying some of these tactics, and it just changed everything for me. It dramatically shifted my mindset on my whole approach in marketing. And my trajectory just went like this, just kind of rocket hockey stick shape, really, where it just shot up from there. And I just, I eventually fell in love with marketing because of what it did for me personally in my business. So then transitioned that into helping others to identify how they could do that for themselves, because we all can, but it's just a matter of understanding those principles. It's not necessarily that you have to go to school or anything like that. It's just recognizing those opportunities that are there and communicating them in such a way that in this case, your patients understand and it resonates with them.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been a fun ride, because I was doing that for several years. I grew my photography business, and then really what happened was, I'm sorry, it's getting really loud out there. But yeah, I was traveling at this point. I was traveling all over the country. Almost every weekend I was booked up, and it was so much fun. But then we had one of my daughters was born, and we knew while my wife was pregnant that she had some health issues, some long-term health issues, and it was going to be a long road ahead. And so I made the decision that, okay, I'm traveling way too much. It was tough too, because, I built it up to this point finally. And it's like, oh, I made it kind of thing, but then, so we transitioned into me just being marketing consulting. And then that's where I really got into dentistry, as I had started with a friend who's a dentist. He needed helping him. And that just kind of, spiraled into that direction. But it's been a great road. For a while too, I was a DSO or I was a marketing director for a DSO, and really enjoyed my time there, but then recognized that I could help practices even better, just one-on-one, Wow. And so yeah, it's been great. I've loved it where it's taken me. I didn't think I'd ever be in this position, but so grateful to be here.
Wow, that's a great story. I appreciate, getting the background is very helpful, and understanding kind of why this is important to you. What are some of the general common problems you see from your expertise, dentists trying when it comes to marketing and failing miserably at?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the first mistake that a lot of practices make is that they fail to communicate what they have to offer from the patient's perspective. We, as humans, we go through life with this "what's in it for me" mentality. We're constantly going through. We're always playing our own story. And just, well, how does this apply to me? And and the other thing to remember with all this is that we are literally bombarded on all sides with marketing messages. They say, it depends on the study you look at, but 3,000 to 7,000 different messages every single day. And physiologically, we just can't process that. That's just, oh man, it's just so much noise. And in order to cut through that, you have to be able to speak directly to that person. And most people don't. Most practices, most companies for that matter, do this. They put themselves up on the pedestal. They're trying to highlight themselves and make themselves look good because they think that that's what the patient wants to see. They think that the patient really wants to know that they've been in business for 27 years, or they went to this school, they have this degree or that degree, and in reality, that's not really what a patient's after. They're after, all they want to know is, can you help me with my problem? And if you can, then great. But if you fail to communicate that from their perspective, then they don't even listen. They don't even know you exist. We've become so adept at just discarding that information. They just moving on, and so that's kind of the first mistake. And do you see that at all, Regan, too, when you're going around? You probably see that all the time.
Absolutely. I think, what stood out to me there is that it is a common problem I know we see, is putting authority first. So you want to justify as a doctor, this is why I am qualified to help you, but there is a key component missing, and that's the hook. That's the what's in this for me. What problem is this solving? ever before you get to the authority stage of I've done this for 27 years for thousands of patients and all of
Right.
that. Yeah. Yeah. So how do you help doctors kind of get out of their own head?
Yeah, it can be tricky because, and I totally empathize with them because, and I was in that same position where, you're not really, and I went to school for it too. So I even have, I have no excuses, but they're not taught this in dental school really. I mean, they don't go over marketing a whole lot. I think they're getting a little bit better at colleges here and there, but they really don't have much time spent studying different marketing practices or principles. And so I totally empathize with them. And we just kind of feel like that's the approach. But what I typically do is step back and try, and honestly, one of the best things you can do is to just ask your patients, just talk and engage with your patients and ask questions, and especially your best patients. You want to understand why they chose you, because they have dozens of options out there, sometimes hundreds of options. If you live in a metro area, you have hundreds of options nowadays. It's just bonkers. But and so they can choose anyone. So ask them why. Ask them why they chose you. What makes them keep coming back? Just be upfront with them and ask them. Say, I love you as a patient. You're like our ideal patient. I'd love to have 100 of you. If I could just clone you, I would. I'd love to learn more about how I could attract more people like you. So are you okay if I ask a few questions and just be sincere about it? And they'll tell you. They'll say, well, honestly, I wasn't really sure. I had this hesitation. But one thing that really stood out to me was the way that you explained this. You took the time to educate me on this procedure and why I needed it, and what the long-term consequences are if I avoided it, or whatever the case may be. But then just go deep with that and really understanding them as a person, as a patient, but also understanding their life, their daily routine. Understanding them if maybe they're a mom and they're constantly shuttling kids back and forth. And so for them, it's about convenience. It's about scheduling everyone as a family and all that. And then you can plug into that, but it's really comes down to understanding your patients, understanding who you're the right fit for, as well as who you're not a great fit for, because we've all been there too, where a patient walks in and like deep down, that they're not a good fit. You just have that sinking feeling like this is going to be a nightmare. But sometimes you feel obligated to treat them, and see them because they're here and they want to be treated. But that's, you can do things in your marketing to attract the right people and also to repel the people that aren't the best fit. That's something I learned in my photography business. And that was like an aha moment where it just, holy cow, the world like opened up to me when I realized I don't ever have to deal with those people again, and it was so neat because I remember I did a lot of weddings and events and so I talked to other photographers and they're like, oh man, I had the crazy bridezilla, and just, there's these horror stories of brides or moms like taking over the day and it's just a disaster for everyone. And they come ask me like, oh, have you ever had that? And I'm like, no, not really. I don't get those type of people. And it's the point I want to make is that you can do that for your practice where you can really define who it is that you're attracting, who you're a good fit for, and even repel those people it's just not going to be a good experience for either side,
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. That's very intriguing because it's counterintuitive to we in the industry here a lot attract the patients you want to attract, and I think that can be a difficult mindset to get into if you are just trying to get patients in the door in general. So it can feel counterintuitive
Right.
to kind of cut off a certain audience member, but the truth in that counterintuitiveness is that it really leads the way for abundance. So as a visual storyteller, Mark, how did you, what were some of the questions that you asked yourself and then you looked for in clients so that you could attract that ideal audience for your services?
Oh, for me, one good approach that you can take is if you're not sure who, if you're kind of new to this whole idea and concept of identifying your ideal patient or your ideal avatar, your ideal customer, a lot of names for it, then, you can look at people that you can deliver. Like if you had one person that, came into your practice, for example, and that had a specific situation, but you know you could knock it out of the park for them every time, that's a good place to start. You know, I mean, if you just say, oh man, line me up with wisdom teeth, like I could do that all day and I make it amazing, like everyone loves it, you know, I do that 24 hours a day. You know, that could be a great place to start. And one caveat with all this too is that, you know, a lot of times when people get into this, they think, oh man, you know, I don't want to shrink the size of my net. You know, I want to cast a wider net. I want more patience. And you know, what you're doing right now is you're using a specific net, you know, to catch a specific type of fish, you know, but eventually what you're going to do is once you've mastered that and really understood and gone deep with that audience, then you're moving on to the next one. So ultimately you're not limiting yourself, but you're playing to that one specific audience right now. Because when you try to, the problem with casting a wider net is that as a result, your messaging has to be generic and it has to be vague so that you're not excluding anyone in that audience, you know, and as a result, it just falls flat. You know, I mean, people don't pay attention to that stuff. It's got to be very specific and address pain points and issues and desired outcomes. So as a storyteller, really, it depends. You have to, once you understand who it is that you're going after, then it makes it so much easier because now you understand that, okay, these people, you know, like for going back to my photography example, once I understood that I was the good fit for older couples, you know, they were, you know, I live in Utah. And so there's a lot of people getting married at like 20, 21, 22, 23, which is great. And I did the same thing. So I'm in that group. I can make fun of it too. So, but I understood that I was a better fit for those people that are a little bit older because my style was different. You know, what they wanted was really a totally hands-off experience. They trusted me completely. They wanted me to capture everything from almost like a candid, you know, photojournalistic style where it's just hands-off. It's just everything's organic and natural. I'm not up in their face. I'm not dictating or directing things to happen. I'm just there capturing it all as it unfolds. Whereas a lot of the people in this area, when they're getting younger, they come to you with like a laundry list of things. Here's my Pinterest page. I want all these shots that are on here. And I'm like, oh, whoa, I'm just a tool here. You know, I kind of felt like just a tool at that point. But when you really go deep and you understand who you're the best fit for, it's easier to then address some of their concerns and their pain points. So in this example, I can now say, you know, I'm not the type, if you have a laundry list of shots that you want, I'm probably not a good fit for you. But if your whole focus is on creating a truly unforgettable experience, not only for yourself as a couple, but also your friends and family that are traveling in from out of state, because a lot of times these are destination type weddings and events, then let's talk. You know, I mean, if you want someone who's going to capture every single emotion and detail without you knowing they're even there, then let's talk. You know, and that's such a different message, you know, and it resonates with the right people. And I remember I had a number of clients. There was a gal in San Francisco specifically who stopped me during one of our shoots. She said, I just have to tell you, when I saw your ad on Facebook, I knew it was like you were talking directly to me. You know, it was the weirdest thing. And I knew from that point that you were going to be our photographer. And that's the cool thing about it. You could do that with marketing. You can be that personal and that intimate with them once you understand what they're going through. But it takes that time, you know, I mean, it takes a lot of investment on your part to dive deep with them and ask them questions.
Wow. So identifying who you are, getting that avatar of who you would like to have come to the practice is your step one in it. And you slid right into social media. I mean, the algorithms today that are controlled. If anybody hasn't watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix, I highly recommend you go and watch it. I am a TikToker. I love to watch TikTok, and it feels like they are speaking to me. And that takes a lot of effort. It's a lot of watching, knowing, and understanding my personal behavior. So from your perspective, I think you just hit on why this is important for social media. And when what are some of the questions that a doctor could ask? Because I'm an advocate for not just because another doctor is doing it doesn't mean I necessarily should be doing it. Right. So is it important that no matter your region, no matter who you're trying to reach is social media, one of the tactics that you highly recommend no matter what they do? Or is it personal to them, just like you preferred working with older couples.
Mhm.
Is the tactic kind of to me aligns with that as well. What are your thoughts on social media and avatar attraction?
Yeah, that's a great question, Reagan. I think for the most part, yes, I would say that it could benefit almost all practices. And there's certainly some that don't need, and we encounter those too, where they're on the tail end of their career and they're okay with just toning it down, like just fading out into the sunset. That's like their dream. And by all means, that's great. That's tremendous. But I think, and then there's also some outliers too that live in perhaps rural areas where there's one of two dentists, maybe one dentist, and that's it. But to them too, I always counsel them, well, what you got to think ahead too. I mean, the chance that someone could always move in and that could be your competition, and they could be very active on social media, and they could swoop in and almost overnight and become the preeminent leader in your area. So you also have to kind of play that game of defense a little bit as well. But for the most part, what I love, and you hit on one of the aspects, Reagan, is that what I love about social media is its incredible ability to target the right people. I mean, a lot of it comes from your understanding, but it once it starts picking up on, it uses its algorithm to do more of what's working. I mean, that's what's so neat about it, is that it can really go fast and or go well in a hurry. And the other thing that I love to share about social media too is that it can work for you all the time. I mean, and it can work for you in different ways. Social media is a lot different than like Google, for example. And this is one of the mistakes that a lot of practices make, is when they start advertising on social media, they treat it like Google. And the reality is that the user what's the right word I'm looking for? The user intent is different on Facebook and Instagram than it is, and on TikTok than it is on Google. Google, they're going in with the intent of finding an answer to a question. I'm ready to find this answer immediately. I've got an itch, I want to scratch it right now. But when they're on social media, that's different. A lot of times they're on there to relax or to veg out or to connect with other people or just watch other people. I mean, they're just there to get entertained a lot of times. And so your approach needs to be a little different. And that's where most practices really fall flat, is that they just try and do the Google approach. But what's cool is that man, there's so many ways to, we could go super deep in this, but you can target people at every different level of their conversion process. So let's say, everyone kind of goes through a normal process to become a patient or become a client, and there's different steps along the way. So some people, they don't even know that they have a need, so they're this far way on this side of the spectrum, whereas others they're more the Google feet. They're like, oh, whipping out their credit card, I'm ready to buy now. Who's it going to be? And most people are down in the middle. I mean, most people are just along the beginning stages or starting to gather information, weighing their options. And that's where social can really come in and do a tremendous job, is you can attract those people. You can get them to maybe opt in for a free resource. And then you can be the one to nurture them along that path. You can provide the education, you can provide the value. They look to you as an industry authority and a leader, because you're publishing information, you're helping them make the best decision possible. And then when the time comes for them to make a decision, you are the incumbent. I mean, you're seen as the one who's, well, you've been helping me this far, I might as well just go to you. And it really, man, I mean, you're capturing like the vast majority of the audience. There's only a tiny fraction that are ready to buy now, and so if you can focus your efforts on reaching that other audience, you're going to have the lion's share of opportunity. So those are the kind of the two things that I love to share about social.
Thinking of one patient, that patient may have multiple needs like you addressed. They may have a family, so convenience may be important to them. They may not have insurance, so affordable payment options may be affordable to them, or maybe attractive to them. Do you just sort of, in a social media campaign, do you kind of throw the kitchen sink and hope that you can, attract them on one of those problems? Or do you tease apart problems to attract them? Like if I'm a doctor getting ready to put the patient's need first and not be like Google and answer a question, what is it that I should do or focus on to be able to have the highest chance of getting their attention?
Yeah, what I like to do is, with our approach really is just to, look back. And you kind of base it off your experience too. I mean, if you're getting commonly asked questions, it can be a great place to start, and so you can start to address those, because that's really where people will begin that process. Once they recognize that they have a need, most likely they're going to start asking those questions, especially when it comes to the dental industry, because those are things that, we just don't know a lot about. We know what a crown is for the most part. We know what an implant is. We have no idea what the process is to get an implant. I actually got one, this big, huge front tooth of mine that got knocked out playing soccer a couple of years ago. I got it. Took me a year. And I'd been in dental for a while, and I still, like the ins and outs, I understood the basic.
It took you a year to get an implant?
Oh, yeah.
So did you just have a missing tooth there for a year?
Yeah, the flipper. Yeah, they extracted it. Oh, and you should have seen my face. You should have seen my face after. Oh my! It looked like I was in this fight. I was like, oh, it looked so bad.
Well, I chipped that same front tooth in half when I was pregnant with my first child. So I was very nervous and thought, oh my gosh, because I'm pregnant, maybe they can't fix my tooth. This is gonna be an issue. I was so embarrassed, but it was an easy process. But I didn't know what I didn't know either.
Well, and that's the thing, so even someone like me who had been in dental for a few years actually at that point, like, I still didn't understand the process fully, and I still had questions. And so you meet them where they are, and that's where a lot of them will be, is at that stage where they're asking questions, and especially because here's what happens, if they don't have any of that, structural information, if they don't have any contextual information, what happens is that they default to price, and we're all the same. Like, well, I understand money, I don't understand, like there's this guy that's charging, $3,500 for an implant. This one says $1,499 for an implant. I have no idea. I understand is this one twice as good? Or, and you play that like mental game of, ping pong back and forth, like,
Right.
But yeah. And so if you can come in and address a question like that, then you're going to get people's attention, and you're going to capture those people that are at that stage. And so our approach, and I always encourage practices to do this, is just focus on one kind of issue and make that kind of your message right there. And then always lead them. You always want to invite them to take the next step. We as humans, we don't really do things unless we're invited to or challenged to do something. So you see, like in all the movies, like Liam Neeson's not going to go off to Europe, like chase these bad guys unless someone took his daughter. He's just not going to do that. And neither will we. And so we've got to get challenged and to see that as a good thing. When you understand that the value that you're providing someone and how the difference it can make in their life and really fully grasp that, it should come a lot more naturally. I know that we don't want to be salespeople. We don't want to be associated or categorized like that, but we're trying to get them the desired benefit. We know what's possible to them. What that outcome could look like for them and what it could mean, the implications on their daily life. And so it's really our moral obligation to help them see that. Whether they do it or not, that's up to them. We're not going to headlock them or, put them in an arm headlock and make them do it. But we want to make sure that they're aware of their options. But so, yeah, I would pick with one issue, one common question, and really go deep with that. And you could do maybe a couple of questions that are similar to that, and then invite them to learn more, and that could just be through, maybe you put together a PDF guide, or maybe you record a video as a doctor and answer these questions, and they can opt in for that. And then you can keep nurturing them along and keep providing them helpful information.
So I hear connect with them on a problem first. For example, a patient may not even know that they need a dental implant or that they could benefit from a dental implant. They just know that they have a missing tooth or a tooth that's about to die a perilous death.
Yes.
And then you get to educate. And I like what you say there, because so many times we get wrapped up feeling like we are having to sell. And there's a really interesting tug of war that goes on between business goals and not wanting to feel greedy and not wanting to feel like it's a money game, which I agree with you fully is a surface game. When you play the game of how much does something cost, it's the wrong conversation to have. So I think you've just outlaid a beautiful strategy using story that pulls in connecting with them on their level educating them, and that was interesting with the downloadable PDF, educating them on the features, the benefits, why this is important to them. Is that the time then, after you've gone through those stages, to bring in the authority, to then outline, the empathy and the authority of understanding where they're at, and then why that doctor is qualified? Because I don't want to miss over that. It is always important, right, that the doctor's credentials do matter. They spend a lot of time in school and CE programs and whatnot. Is that the appropriate time to bring in the authority?
Yeah, and you can start to weave it in. And my advice is always to translate that into a direct benefit for the patient. So into terms that they can understand as a direct benefit to them. So if I've been certified in all these different specializations, then okay, you can always ask the question, so what? So what does that mean? So that you as a patient, it's easier for you. We use the latest technology and that will make it easier in terms of it's less time consuming, it's less invasive. Your recovery is going to be better. It's going to look better, more aesthetically, and just go into detail on what that means, because too often we just assume that they know what that means. Well, here's the benefit. You should figure out what that means, but we have no idea, I don't know what that means. So tell me. That's a great time to do that. And it always in the context of why it's important to them. So I always add those two words to it. So what, so that you make sure that you're doing that. You've touched on another thing too, Regan, is just this element of story, and maybe we'll dive into this in a little bit. But I think that's so critical but the point I wanted to make actually before this was on empathy, because that's, and I was going to tie that into the story. Sorry, I get a little, but yeah, empathy is so cool because once you can articulate, and if you have that ability to articulate their situation even better than they can, then that's instant credibility. That's happened. We've all had that happen, right? Someone comes to us and you've messed up somehow, and someone comes over and be like, oh, you're at this stage, right? And well, it'll get better, but you're gonna have to go through this and this first. And all of a sudden you're like, oh man, that guy knows what he's talking about, And
the visual that underlines, like when you said meet doctors where they're at, or meet patients where they're at. So the visual that I get when I close my eyes is, somebody's sitting on a curb somewhere, maybe their head's in their hand, and you come alongside them and sit down next to them.
Yeah.
And hear what they have to say. That's what I hear when I see, when I hear the word empathy and what that feels like to that patient.
Yeah, exactly. And they're just, this forms an immediate bond. We had, so I'll give you an example, a personal example, but we had, when our daughter, so she had some physical issues, and eventually later on we found out she was diagnosed with cancer, and thankfully she's okay now. We've gone through a lot of things, and she's okay. She's doing great. So we're so fortunate. But I remember going to people, and we'd talk to family and friends, but then I remember one of my friends whose daughter had leukemia, having him come over, and it was early on after we found out, and just being able to talk to him, and it wasn't anything that he said, but just the fact that he knew exactly what we're going through, it just immediately I felt better. I felt like, okay, we can do this. Whereas I was talking to my family, my parents and siblings, and whom I love and adore, and we have great relationship with, and I respect, but it wasn't the same. Like they don't know what it's like, and so you have that opportunity to do that same thing with your patient. If you can describe that to them and articulate that in such a way that patient's like, holy cow, this person gets what's going on. Like they know exactly what's going on. Then it's night and day. All of a sudden they're gonna trust you, and they're gonna listen to you, and that's the power of empathy in there. So just wanted to add that in.
It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. For the dentists that are listening, I would say the large majority of folks listening to our podcast in particular have social media. Mark, what can they do when they pop over to their social media to kind of test the waters and see if they're using social media as well as they could be and effectively?
Yeah, great question. And that's another huge benefit of social media is it's a great way to test things out, especially organically. You try out different things. I did this for one of our clients where we just asked a question, say, what's your biggest challenge right now? And and they, man, just flooded with comments. There was like 13, 14 comments within the hour, and that's the thing. You can engage in dialogue on social and really dive deep. It's you can have almost a one-on-one conversation with these people if you're commenting, and eventually you could direct message them or however you want to approach that. But you're mining all this information. You're better understanding where they're at. And so I think just having those conversations, being very open and even vulnerable, and say, hey, I want to get better at this. I've had some feedback on this. I've had one client that did this. It was so cool. They posted like a 1-star review and said, just basically said, here's a chance for us to get better. And we're serious about this. That's why I'm posting this.
Whoa.
I want your feedback. I know. And it was like, holy cow. It was an eye opener for people. And it was awesome. It was so revealing and so endearing in a lot of ways, so that's another great thing you can do. But
so did that doctor propel and see success because they were brave enough to post a 1-star review that they received?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was so cool. It was very vulnerable, and it opened up and shared why it didn't go so well, from their perspective, and things that they want to try and do better, but also encouraging input too, and just say, we're sincere when we say we want to make this the best practice out there, and so just asking that and following up and demonstrating that you're doing that. So yeah, those are some good ways to get started. But I think also once you have those conversations, making a mental note or keeping, it's easy to do now with your phone or your Google Doc or whatever you want to use, just start copying and pasting some of the phrases that they use or that you hear in your office all the time. So get your team involved, have them start listening and be like, oh, I just feel like I'm spinning my wheels every single day, or all I do is shuttle kids around. Because you want to use the same language that they're using, because that's going to resonate with them. It's going to feel like you're one of them because you're using the same words, and so that's a great copywriting little tip that you can do, is just try and use those words that they're using. So if they're coming up a lot, that's something to make note of.
Now, business Facebook pages, if we talked about Facebook, for example, as the platform of choice for today, or Instagram, I know that Facebook can work against that business algorithm a little bit. So is there advice that you would have for doctors who maybe aren't getting the level of engagement? They may be asking questions, but it's kind of crickets. Is there something that they can do to help encourage and boost that engagement?
Yeah, this is a tough one, because it's changed so much. It used to be where your whole goal was to build up followers, and you get people to like your page. And then what's great about that was you post on your page and all your followers would see it at some point. But now that is not the case anymore, unfortunately.
Right.
It's more of they've almost gone to more of a pay to play model, where unless you have, and here's the caveat to all that. Here's the one exception to that is unless you have really engaging content. So it helps to take a step back and look at things from Facebook and Instagram's point of view. So their whole goal is to try and keep you on their platform as long as possible. And if they can show you content that's gonna, maybe it's a video that you watch for 30 seconds, or maybe it's a funny post or something like that, or really engaging post that could be polarizing, could be not. But that's gonna keep you on their platform and stay there longer, rather than flipping over to, in my case, ESPN or something else, or a text or whatever. And so if you're just posting stuff that's not engaging, which this happens all the time, in the dental world, where it's like this canned content that, it's like 16 different uses for Colgate toothpaste or whatever, and people are like, I don't care about that. Like, you can see it, you can spot it a mile away. But that's the challenge, is coming up with content that's engaging. And it's tricky, it's tricky. You can spend a lot of time on that and still not see the engagement. And so it's a tough battle. One thing that we'll do is, videos are a great way. Videos are a great way to get started, but you have to overcome that. You have to be comfortable with that. It's a very vulnerable. A lot of doctors, a lot of team members aren't comfortable doing that, but you can do like a video tour, or you can do of your office. You can do, get patients involved if you can, or you could just set it on your desk and do like a Q&A, and just say, hey, we're gonna do this every Thursday. and Facebook and Instagram love video because, again, coming back to that, it helps people stay on their platform longer generally. So those are good ways to kind of do that. Pictures are always generally good. There's times when you don't want picture, like you can break that up. Like what that example with where I had a client that just asked the question. It wasn't the review one, but it was just a question with no pictures. That was a great way to break that up, because sometimes we're too image heavy, on Instagram and Facebook.
So I'm hearing be okay with testing things out. Be okay with testing if pictures work. Being brave enough to maybe post a video and see how that works. Should doctors, if they post a video and they get no views or little views, should they take it down and try? Because I think that can be one of the barriers. Is I just want everything to be perfect. I know that dentists often struggle with the perfectionism and releasing everything, and to me that is part of the vulnerability of it. Is this perfect? So is there value in trying different things and leaving it up and going forward with it? Do you think that just shares more of the realism, or do you think that they should, if something doesn't work, delete it and start all over again?
No, I totally agree with that. I think it helps to tell your story as a practice, just that you're okay making mistakes, and you're going to do whatever you can to obviously make those right. If it's a clinical error or anything like that, but also that as a human, like, you're comfortable enough to share that. You're coming from a place where you have self-confidence, and you're okay being like, hey, I totally messed up, and here's what I did wrong, or I'm still learning Facebook. It's okay, just forgive me, and people are so forgiving that way, especially with social media. That's what's so cool, is you don't need fancy production gear. You don't need a nice camera. Audio is the one thing that's like, you should be able to hear nice. You should have some decent audio, but as long as you're close to your phone, like, you'll be fine. And so it doesn't need to be perfect, and people actually prefer that it's not, because sometimes when they see it's overly done, or it just looks like someone's come in, it looks like an ad, and then again, we're trained to just, I'm just scrolling through that. Like, I'm not stopping for that.
That's interesting that you bring that up, because I was just talking to our online producer, Kashmir, today about another podcast that I follow that I love and adore. And I'm not going to name it because I have a critical feedback for it. When it began, it was very raw. It was very real. I knew that the topic, they were passionate about the topic. They were bringing the tools right to us. It was a really very valuable thing. And I feel like at this point it's become overproduced. So now it feels almost like an advertisement, and it's very shiny. It sounds like the sound quality is higher production. The outline is clearly really well thought out, but it's lost some of that authenticity. And I think that is a gift that social media does give us, is the chance to be real and authentic. Dr. Andy Droll, which I know I have mentioned on this podcast probably multiple times because it was the favorite video of 2020. He just turned on his camera during the middle of the pandemic when he was closed and looked right into it and said, "I miss seeing you." Not I miss seeing my patients, not I miss seeing you. And he was teary and he was emotional about it. And he was just sharing, where the practice was at, what they were working on, and the uncertainty around it, and his genuine sincerity in getting excited to see patients again one day. And it was just, to me, that you couldn't beat that. It was authenticity, and it was empathetic. It was bringing in, getting on their level of, you can't see us and we can't see you, and we feel that. It was beautiful. So I think your message today is very poignant across any tactic. And I think, I think patient retention goes up when you start the conversation that way.
Yeah, 100%, and to piggyback off that, I think what he did so well is just made it very personal, and that's one thing that, as you're getting started, a lot of people can fall into the trap of, hey, I'm writing to a group, I'm posting this to the world of Facebook or my community or whoever that might be, even an email, I'm posting to all my patients. But the reality is you want to write this like I'm just writing Regan, I'm just sitting down at my desk. I'm just going to make Regan a message right now, and make it sound like that. There was a great example too, where, it wasn't one of my clients, but I heard about it from someone else, and I thought, oh, it's brilliant. Just a simple email. It was like one line long that said, Regan, what can I do to help? It was something like that, what are you working through right now? And it was just a simple one-liner, that and it opened up the door for so many wonderful conversations. A lot of patients responded to that, reacted to that, and gave them so much more insight. And again, it kind of comes back to that, to telling the story of who you are and who you are as a practice. And that's the thing. I think a lot of practices, a lot of doctors out there, a lot of providers out there, they got into this because they genuinely care about people. They love that service aspect of their profession, and they love those relationships. Like it makes them so excited. And so, yeah, just to help share that, I love that video. I think everyone should do that 100%.
You know what this reminds me of? Speaking of storytelling, Garth Brooks. Of all, if anybody out there is a country music fan or a Garth Brooks fan,
yeah,
I waited a very long time to go to my first Garth Brooks concert, and I was so excited. I was very excited to be there. I went down to Tacoma, Washington, the Tacoma Dome, which is huge, and I felt like the entire concert he was speaking to us from his living room, to me directly, even though I was just a little, head of a needle in this haystack of fans. And not only that, but he had a cold at the time. So his singing wasn't even like where it should be. And he still showed up. He gave it his all. I felt like he was connecting with me. And if you're listening to this right now, Dennis, I recommend you go look at Garth Brooks' social media, because he definitely makes me feel like he's speaking to me or to you while addressing the need. And I think you just highlighted that to a T. Put that one person in your mind. You're speaking to one, and by speaking to one, you're speaking to all you want to attract.
Yeah, exactly. They are, and this is the whole thing with when we talk about storytelling is making that person the hero of the story. You are not, I hate to break it to you if you feel this way, but you're not the hero of their story. And a lot of people get attached to that, but if you can shift that mindset and really put them up on a pedestal, you're there to serve them, and you're there to help them achieve their goals. You're the guide, you're the trusted guide on that path to get them there. What needs to be taken, what steps need to be taken, and you can direct them to help get them there. So yeah, that's a great, Garth Brooks is such a stud. I that's a great example.
Wow, this has been a fantastic conversation, Mark. I hope to have you on our podcast again. It's been a joy meeting you, knowing you, and thanks for helping all of our audience today, pull forth an authentic story and reach patients where they're at.
No, it's been my pleasure. I love talking about story just because it has, we're wired for stories. We as humans, that's why we go to Facebook, that's why we spend so much time on social or watching TV or YouTube, is because we love those stories. And there's a cool fact about, I actually wanted to share this too, but neuroscientists have discovered that people on average spend about 30% of their day daydreaming, unless they're already engaged in a story. And it's been scientifically proven that we're looking to be involved in a story our whole time, and it's a tremendous way to cut through all the noise and the clutter. In fact, I kind of compare it to the difference between music and noise. There's noise going on all the time, and you can compare that to all the advertising and all that stuff. But when you just rearrange that noise with certain notes and frame, composition, I can't remember the right terms, but if you rearrange those in the right way, it becomes music, and all of a sudden you can pick out a song like from way out there, and you can pick out a song that you haven't heard in 20 years, and all the lyrics to that song, and that's the power of story. Story works in the same way. So I love talking about it. As you can tell, I could keep going, but I really appreciate you having me on here, Regan.
Absolutely, and I will have you back. If you are hungry for more Mark Thackeray, head on over to Dental Marketing Secrets podcast, where he releases fresh content quite often, or practicerocket.net. Thank you, Mark, for being our guest, and I wish you the best. Thank you for listening to another episode of Everyday Practices Podcast. Chad and I are here every week thanks to our community of listeners just like you, and we'd love your help. It would mean the world if you can help spread the word by sharing this episode with a fellow dentist and leave us a review on iTunes or Spotify. Do you have an extraordinary story you'd like to share or feedback on how we can make this podcast even more awesome? Drop us an email at podcast@productivedentist.com.
And don't forget to check out our other podcasts from Productive Dentist Academy at productivedentist.com/podcasts. See you next week.